intercepted. Coming back the other way. Ifatu Melifonwu. This is going to be over. Lions are going to win it. Lions are bringing the NFC North title back to Detroit.
All right. What's happening, everybody? It is Wednesday night, Off the Cuff, Rock Down Detroit Lions podcast on your network, Rock Down Podcast Network. Hey, do us a favor before we get rolling. Check out sportspider.com. That is sportspyder.com. Check it out and add all of your sports to your profile so you guys can get up to the minute news each and every day for all the sports that you enjoy. Sportspider.com. All right, let's get that out of the way. Let's talk about some news and a few things that popped off today. So a bit surprising. Everyone's already aware, right? Brock Wright comes back, and the Lions decided to match the offer from the 49ers. But I think what you're going to hear from me in just a few moments about another team is that the 49ers appear to be poaching, if you will. And I think it's for a reason, and I'm going to speculate on it. But anyway, here we go. All right, so Lions re-signed Brock Wright, 3 years, $12 million deal, $6 million guaranteed. Now, earlier when I spoke to this, I thought it was only 4.1 guaranteed, which was not the case. So it's $6 million, so it's quite a bit more. Obviously, I had this one wrong. I did not think the Lions would be bringing back Brock Wright, especially for that kind of money. But when you look at the deal, and we don't have all of the terms of the deal yet, but $6 million guaranteed means that if they kept him around for 2 seasons, you would basically pay him about $3 million a year, depending on when you let him go, if you let him go. And I'm not saying that would happen, but you never know. Obviously, the Lions, did not think highly enough of Brock Wright to really jump out and, pay him a long-term deal. And, here the Lions do it, and they bring him back in. And honestly, you're paying a second tight end about $4 million a year. That's big time money for a second tight end. Especially with someone that really hasn't done a whole lot, so far. Braylon, I'll get to your message here in just a minute. The Lions had tendered Wright a 1-year, $2.985 million contract that gave them the right of first refusal. If the 25-year-old tight end obviously had gotten an offer sheet elsewhere, Wright, would have had the opportunity to be matched by the Lions, and they did that. But Wright signed the larger offer sheet from the 49ers. It gave the Lions 5 days to come up with a plan. Either we're going to pass or we're going to bring him back. They decided to match it and bring him back. The good news is they brought him back from a conference rival. And that's where I'm going to go in a few minutes is, what the 49ers are potentially up to. But the Lions obviously ultimately decided to bring Wright back, give him the pay raise, keep him around. Good. It's a good decision. Like, I'm 100% on board with it for a few reasons. One, he's been clutch at times. I'll never forget the Dan Miller call when Brock Wright caught that pass in 2022 for like 50 some odd yards. It was a crazy play. And he just kind of rumbled and tumbled all the way down the field. It was an excellent call by Dan Miller. Even better call by Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell. But Brock Wright tends to use his under the radar presence, to his benefit and to the Lions' benefit, because nobody's really expecting him to go out and catch passes, at least very often anyway. So he's come up pretty big, and so big, in fact, that he did have a big impact in the playoffs last year, catching a 29-yard touchdown in the win over Tampa Bay, sealed the game. It was a catch that put the Lions in the NFC title game. So he has been clutch. He has done some excellent things for the Lions over his, few seasons in Detroit. But later in that game is when he broke his forearm. Obviously, he missed the title game, and he must be, back, to either full health or pretty close by now. Broken forearm kind of heals quicker than most, but he's really young. So I'm expecting he'll be ready to go, good to go for the season. Look, Wright's been a steady presence. in Detroit, especially in this tight end room since joining the Lions in 2021. He's not really been in the stat line a whole lot. So last few seasons, he's only put together 43 catches, 424 yards, and 7 touchdowns. That's where, for me, you're looking at $4 million and it's like, what has he done? He's done plenty. And I don't know if you can put a price on somebody that is consistent, that's a team guy, that's a locker room guy, it's a grit guy. I mean, it's everything that you want. He has all the intangibles. He's just not a producer guy yet. In last season, 13 receptions, 91 yards, and 1 touchdown in 14 games. So not the greatest stat line guy, and that's why, I felt like the Lions would be better, 1, to draft a rookie that could at least do that, or 2, go in a different direction if Brock Wright decided to, go elsewhere. Now let me get back to Braylon Dennis. He says, let's be honest. None of you thought Brock was worth $12 million except for me. And if you were, or if you thought he was, you were lying. That's funny. That's just funny. And Braylon follows that up with, I guess Brad is not a cheap SOB after all. King SJ, what's happening, my man? So let me welcome everybody into the chat. We got Lone Wolf. We've got Tracy. We've got Eric Rintamaki. Rintamaki. Just making sure everybody knows how to pronounce his last name. Mike P. John Desage. Jason Wagner. Sean Rounds. Adam's in the house. Let's see. Who else do we have? J Mommy. Frank Towns. Bruce Morton. Colby Stacy. What else? Mr. Robot. And I think that's about it. Oh, Craig Hogue and Stephen Neely, also Lions Talk with a Bad Guy in the house. All right. So next news around the league, next news for the Detroit Lions is Vildor. Kindle Vildor. The NFL is all about relationships, in my opinion, at times. Sometimes you make a roster just because you've got a good relationship with somebody. Sometimes you come back to a team because you have a good relationship with somebody. But in Vildor's case, he comes back on a 1-year deal and he reunites with his former defensive back coach from Chicago when he was in Chicago, Deshea Townsend. Vildor is the 3rd cornerback that the Lions had brought back from the 2023 roster. Of course, that Detroit also signed or re-signed Emmanuel Mosley and Khalil Dorsey to 1-year deals this past or current offseason. So the fact that, he has history with Townsend, it tells me that he might have more than just an outside chance to make this roster. I still think that it's potentially a little bit more than a camp body, still a camp body, but maybe a little bit more than a camp body move. Townsend must believe that he can get more out of Vildor than what Dre Bly was getting out of Vildor. And he probably knows how to use Vildor a little bit better, to his strengths, having the history with him in Chicago, where Vildor is actually pretty decent in Chicago. When new coaches come into new teams, the understanding that I've gathered is that these new coaches will often do a ton of film study right away. They already have the cut-ups done. It's not like me doing film study where I've got to go find everything, cut it all up, and then go through it. It's different. They've got everything ready to go. They can watch 10 hours worth of film in an hour. And so they do all this film study to kind of look at, who's on the roster last year, who's coming up in free agency, what do I have to work with, what am I working with? And, you do this evaluation on the current roster really prior to free agency. They need to see, really what they had. Can it be fixed? Where were the issues at, in Townsend's case, in the defensive back room? Is it coachable? Is it fixable? Is it not? I mean, is it so far off, out in the left field that they can't do anything with it? In this case, we're not really going to know this answer until training camp rolls around. And we'll see a little bit more. But if he makes the roster and he starts playing in week 1, that's when we're really going to know if Deshea Townsend is worth his weight in salt and can really work some magic with this defensive back room because it needs a major overhaul. And I'll come back to the chat here in just a second here. Give me just a second. And I appreciate that, Caleb Klein. Appreciate you jumping in and starting to chat, man. That's what it's all about. Don't be afraid to start to, moving the thumbs and texting into the chat. It's a good group of people in here, man. Everybody in here is good group of people. So my next question would be this, though, because we heard a couple weeks ago, March 26th, that the Lions were potentially done adding cornerback per Brad Holmes. Per Dan Campbell, he wanted more competition in the room. Like I said, it was the first time that I've seen them, or heard them clash on opinion. And we're thinking, to your credit in the chat too, well, was this just more smokescreen season? Are they just trying to get us off the scent? Or was there something to it? Was there something coming up on the horizon? I don't think anybody really had the right answer. I think a lot of us were guessing, and thinking, well, they're probably going to do this in the draft. But with Vildor returning, now, well, let me back up. It's kind of odd that the Lions elected to bring back 3 players from their 2023 cornerback room: Mosley, Vildor, and Dorsey. Now, those are the 3 guys. Obviously, Mosley, they really regard, quite highly. They think a lot of Mosley. They're hoping that he can come back and play at a high level. But Vildor and Dorsey, I would assume that those are the guys that are going to have to work extra hard, to earn a spot on this team. Detroit was 27th in passing yards allowed and 29th in yards yielded per pass attempt last season. So it was a bit surprising that they brought anybody back, to be honest with you. I mean, Cam Sutton was the only one that we thought was going to come back because he just signed a 3-year deal. But he helped himself out of that contract, unfortunately. And now the Lions kind of have to reset the table a little bit again. So with Vildor returning, the Lions now have 8 cornerbacks on the roster, including Brian Branch at nickel. So outside of perhaps, maybe a day 3 prospect being added to this roster, or maybe some other undrafted free agents, maybe Detroit is set at cornerback. Maybe we are overthinking this a little bit too much. Or maybe not. Because the Lions, should be better at cornerback just with Davis and Robertson in this starting lineup. But neither, potential starter is signed long-term. That's the problem. Amik Robertson is signed for 2. Davis is signed for 1. And for that reason alone, and the same exact problem that the Lions had last season, entering this offseason, is that they didn't have anybody signed. And so you're going into a season with one guy, Cam Sutton. And I think Chase, was it Chase Lucas that was the other one? But we had exclusive rights on or something like that. I can't remember now. No, I'm sorry, Stephon Gilmore. Or not Stephon, Stephen Gilmore. So the desire for more competition per Dan Campbell clearly was, him adding Vildor to the roster, or at least Brad Holmes doing it, and getting that guy back in the mix to give the Lions some options. But the more I think about it, though, you only have the desire for more competition against Vildor, Dorsey, and Mosley, which leaves me to believe that the Lions still could be drafting a cornerback in one of the first 2 rounds. And I say first 2 rounds because there's options at both spots and pretty darn good options. And I still want to believe that they want to address the bigger issue, which is either going to be defensive end or securing another wide receiver should things go south with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's the opening statements, and that's your news for the Detroit Lions that really kicked off today. Let me see what everyone is saying here in the chat and see if we've got any good statements, questions. All right. So Braylon Dennis feels that Vildor is going to the practice squad. And Evan Smoke says, how many of us honestly studied Wright effect on our run game? Brad and the coaching staff have. That's a good point. I mean, Brock Wright is probably one of the better blocking tight ends in the league. You also have a pretty good group of, extra tackles and guards and that they've brought in at times for bigger packages. But Brock Wright is one of the better blocking tight ends in the league. I mean, he's heavily utilized in run support, and that's probably his best attribute. That's why he's not a pass catcher. That's why his stats are what they are. It kind of makes, or at least appears to make, the Lions more one-dimensional with Brock Wright, because teams kind of understand that when he's in the game, he's usually blocking. And that's also when they usually get burned. And Brock Wright will pull one out. It happens sparingly, but it happens, and it's usually at the right time, because Ben Johnson knows when, to pull that one out of the hat. So Eric Rintamaki says Victor and Wright are both good backups with a knowledge of the system and team. Great knowledge base for rookies. Lion King says Brock Wright is for our wham block and useful on play action, asked to do the dirty work stuff. Absolutely. Let's see. Frank Towns, Vildor was in perfect position, just couldn't locate the rock. Oh, he located it all right. It just bounced off his face mask. Appreciate the compliment there, Adam. Run DMG says we blew up our defense backfield from last year. A good defensive line will make all of our DBs look better. I couldn't agree more. You've got to fix one or the other. You have to. You either have to fix the defensive front or you have to fix the defensive backs. Should you fix both? Great. But as long as one of them gets fixed this season, the Lions are going to be in great shape. So Sean Rounds, Will, do you think now that we have a lot of cornerbacks on the team, we won't spend a draft pick on a cornerback in the first 3 rounds? So you must have put that in before I said what I said, but I'll say it again. I still think that they're going to add a corner in the first 3 rounds. Absolutely. Matter of fact, it's going to be, it would have to be before pick 73. If they really want a top tier corner, someone that can come in and potentially start right away if they needed him to, not saying they need him to, it would have to be by pick 73. Could you get lucky in the 4th round that we don't have yet? You could. You absolutely could. I think that there's still some good players, even as late into the 5th round. But anything past that, I'm not personally sold on, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. Sean Rounds backed that one up and says, I swear if we get an update that Will Harris was re-signed, I will go on a hunger strike. Hey, I need to lose 30 pounds myself. So, I would say I would do that with you. Nick P doesn't see it going south with Amon Ra. I hope not. Hey, if you guys want him on the team, we got to hope that they're willing to pay. So remind me, here, let me jot a note in here. I want to talk about Amon Ra for just a moment, because there's something that I saw today that kind of gives you a little bit of pause for concern if you were to sign him to a big deal. Let's see here. Can't wait to hear about what you have to say about the teams trying to poach. It's coming up here in just a second. Run DMG says we have resources to trade up for an impactful defensive end. The DBs will look better if we can establish pressure without having to bring additional players. The nice thing that about this defense that Aaron Glenn runs is we can be so multiple and diverse in just about any front that they present. And it's really confusing on offenses. Now, it's not like what the Vikings are doing. Dropping 8. My goodness. You do that in college. You don't do that in the NFL. But it was enough of a confusion that it really played well into their hand. But now the Vikings are having to start pretty much all over again. They lost a lot of great players. They brought in some good players. Caleb Klein says, honestly, your first mock with no trades made me thinking that you were crazy, but your second one with the trades was way better. And after these pickups, we are definitely trading up for Dallas Turner. Hey, that would be great, man. If we got Dallas Turner, I would be through the roof. Absolutely would be through the roof. Mike P, I think you're right, Will, about the corner. Melton, maybe. Yeah, there's quite a few, man. There's quite a few. Renardo Green, Max Melton. You can get them a little bit later. McGlovern. or McLaughlin, sorry, and Kamal Hayden. I mean, Kamal Hayden is still high on my list. It'll be interesting to see how everybody moves up the board over the next couple of weeks. Hey, we got J Mommy in the house. Says maybe the Lions should move back to get a third or a fourth. It's possible. It's absolutely possible. You know, Mike P, I was not sold on Cam Hart either. And I don't think he's going to get picked super early. But Adam Aniba did a nice mock-up of Cam Hart. And I got to tell you, and even Jim Nagy really thinks a lot of this kid too. I got to tell you, after watching and reading his report, made me look a little bit harder at Cam Hart. He's big, you know, he's tall, he's rangy. He's also handsy. He likes to grab, which it seems like a lot of young corners do. They're really grabby, handsy, you know, at the college ranks. And in the NFL, I mean, you just can't do it. You got to play with hands in your pockets. Otherwise, you're gonna get dirty laundry all day. Is Kittle still hurt? San Fran was gonna use Brock Wright more than we will, but Brock Wright is valuable. So here's my hot take on the 49ers on Kittle. There's another one coming up in just a minute. On the 49ers in Kittle, I honestly believe this. Now, I haven't sourced it. I haven't reached out to the West Coast. I haven't spoken to anybody. But I started thinking when this Brock Wright thing was coming, like they've already got 4 tight ends on the roster with Kittle. Now, Brock Wright, obviously being a blocking tight end, they're probably looking to add that element to their roster. Not, you know, a pass catching tight end, because that's not what Brock Wright is. Yet, doesn't mean he can't do it. He just hasn't shown anybody the ability to do it at a high level like a Kittle. But could the 49ers, now stay with me here, could they be looking to reset their tight end room and trade Kittle in the draft or just before the draft? Because where they're picking right now, they're either expecting somebody like Brock Bowers to slide back and they might have a shot, or they might be able to move up just a little bit and grab Bowers. Because Bowers has been projected to fall all the way to 29 to the Lions. So you have that option. Option number 2 is there's some really good tight ends in this draft, like a few in the first 3 rounds that they'll be available. So are they thinking of grabbing one of them and kind of resetting what they're doing at the tight end position? I think that the option is out there. I think it's a viable play. I mean, if I were the 49ers, I would sell Kittle right now. I don't know what his contract's like, so I don't know if he has a no trade clause or something crazy like that. And I don't know I didn't look at his salary this year, so I don't know if he's due a bunch of money. I would assume that he is, and I would move him in a heartbeat. I would move him, and I would get younger at the position because he's only getting older. Oh, Derek would absolutely throw a party if we got Turner. Look, Brad Holmes has to get a defensive end. Otherwise, I just don't know how much longer Derek's going to be able to deal with it. Oh, man. I could see his face now, man. I could see it. I could envision the whole stream. It'll be a 24-hour long stream. He'll be praising Brad Holmes forever. So, yeah, he's got to get it done. Brad Holmes has got to get it done. I hope he does. All right, let me keep going here. Some news around the NFC North, and then once I get done with this, we'll open up phone lines. So I'll start with the Bears first. This is news, but no news. The Bears are obviously hosting Caleb Williams for dinner this week, and they are also bringing in Rome Odunze for a visit tomorrow. So in most of my mocks, I have said that the Bears, you know, obviously they're taking a quarterback. I wouldn't take Caleb Williams just because of all the drama, but they more than likely are going to. It's a foregone conclusion. It's done. If I was them, like I've said many times, I would move back to pick 2, 3, or 4 and just grab the leftover quarterback and utilize all that draft capital to make my team really good. And then next year I would go get a quarterback. That's exactly what I would do. especially with a Shedeur Sanders or somebody, that's around, and seeing how he develops this year. But pairing Williams with Odunze, this is something that I've been saying that the Bears would more than likely do is grab a wide receiver and a quarterback, with their first 2 picks. That way you've got, both guys on rookie contracts. It's a real popular theory right now, gaining momentum in a lot of NFL draft analysts' eyes that, the quarterback receiver tandem, whether it's Odunze and Williams or Williams and somebody else, obviously playing together for 4 seasons at a reduced salary is, it's quite enticing. But Odunze was the Biletnikoff award finalist last season, catching 92 passes for 1,640 yards and 13 TDs. I believe that adding Odunze would be the cherry on top for the Bears this year and their offense, especially, after their blockbuster trade, to acquire the former Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver, Keenan Allen last month. As we know, Allen is a 6-time Pro Bowler. He has 6 1,000-yard seasons in his 11-year career. Now, he's older. Doesn't mean he won't be able to produce this season, but how much longer is he going to be able to produce at a high level, and how much longer is he going to play football? So I think that's why, bringing in Odunze, would make an immediate impact for Chicago's, future quarterback, in adding another talented wide receiver is really not a necessity either, because Allen is in the mix, but I think you would want to add one earlier as opposed to later. And that way they can learn from Allen. It's what we've always talked about on this channel is it's always good to bring players in a little bit early if you can. I know it's not feasible all the time, but the earlier you can bring them in, the better for your team, because they have a chance to learn before they have to go do it. Anybody got any comments on that? Let's see here. Bob W says, I was in Costco today wearing a Lions cap. A guy comes up to me saying he just heard Goff was traded to Washington. Don't know if he was joking or believed it. It was a good April Fool's article. That's funny. Yeah, on April 1st, you might as well just turn off your phones, because everything you're going to read is just about garbage. Nick P says, I think needs to invest into the defense with the first. Wait a second. I think that you must mean I think Brad Holmes needs to invest into the defense with the first couple of picks, unless it is a future offensive line starter like Barton, Frazier, or Powers Johnson. Celine 313 says, if you could only draft one player in this draft, who would I want on the team? Not for need, not for the team, just your best player you'd want. That is a great question. That is absolutely a great question, and I'm going to write it down, and we'll come back to that one. We'll come back to it. We'll make it a Q&A or something. And speaking of Q&A, so I have on here, what team on the 2024 opponents list has you the most worried for the Detroit Lions? I did a video a little earlier about the Texans. Pretty scary team. They're only getting better, adding Stephon Diggs today. And for that reason, and after everything that I read in the video, they're going to be the hardest team to beat this year. Absolutely the hardest team to beat. They're going to be one of the best teams in the league this year, guaranteed. And my other call, early, even before we get to training camp, was that I felt that the Arizona Cardinals were going to be the 2024 version of the 23 Houston Texans, meaning that they're going to jump out, make big strides this year, and potentially make the playoffs and do exactly what the Texans did. I think the Texans are only going to make it that much further. And I really believe the Texans could potentially be in the AFC title game. I really do. I think they're that good. CJ Stroud proved it to us last year that he's that good. Green Bay concerns Evan. And Bears O-line is still trash. Exactly. That's why I love Poles, because he makes all the wrong decisions. Like, bring in a quarterback, but fail to address the offensive line. See how long he lasts. It only takes a couple of good hits and the guy's career's over. But to that fact, or to that point, Justin Fields couldn't do anything because he didn't have an offensive line either. He had to run all the time. That's why, he barely had 40 TDs in, 3 seasons with the Bears? 40 TDs. Jared Goff's got 80 in the last 3 seasons with the Lions? Something like that. It's craziness. So anyway, that's it on the Bears. Look, I think that they would be smart to a defensive player, obviously opposite, of Caleb Williams. You grab Caleb, grab a defensive player. I also think that they should grab an offensive lineman. But we'll see what happens. Ryan Poles just doesn't seem to get it at times. At least that's my opinion. He just grabs players to grab players without looking at the culture, the identity fit, all of it. The players that he grabs just don't make sense to me. And it's not because I'm jealous of some of the players that he's brought in, because he's brought in some pretty darn good players, but they haven't produced. All right. So on the Packers. So this is where I'm going to dip into the 49ers. So the 49ers are actually dipping their toes into the NFC North once again. And I said, I thought that I kind of see what's going on here. So on Wednesday, today, the 49ers made another addition to the offense. Right after Brock Wright was sealed up by the Detroit Lions, they went and signed former Green Bay Packers running back Patrick Taylor Jr. to a 1-year deal. And what I think is going on here is it's almost like the 49ers want to bring in one player from, all of their top rivals that could potentially be competing with them, in the NFC title game. The Packers had a pretty good, end of their run of their season. The Lions, obviously, we did what we did. They keep looking for opportunity to grab players to bring into, their room and probably milk as much as they can out of them and get to understand as much as they can about that team and learn all of the nuances, or maybe learn, the verbiage, because the verbiage is what really changes from team to team. When you look at these teams and how they run their offenses, they're pretty much all identical. And defenses. Like, a lot of this stuff is identical. Like, there's only so many 4-3s or 3-4s or nickels or dime pack. There's only so many plays that you can run. But it's how you call the plays. It's the verbiage that you use. That's why one guy yells, here we go, right? Good old Dak. And then you got another guy that yells Omaha. Everything's a little bit different from each team. I can't remember all the quarterback calls right now. What did Stafford used to call? He used to say blue 80. Didn't he always say blue 80, blue 80, blue 80? It's all about verbiage. So if you learn the verbiage, you can figure out a team. It's almost like when you steal signs. If you steal signs, you can learn a lot about a team. I'm just waiting for the chat to light up with that one. I'm just messing with you. Talk about baseball signs, from the catcher. Baseball signs. Not filming, from the sidelines, getting signs or anything like that. I'm just kidding, guys. All right. So Vikings. There is a rumor floating around that the Vikings may be passing on a quarterback in this draft, which is shocking because it seems like they intentionally moved up, to have 2 picks in the first round, to be able to move up again into the top 4 to grab a quarterback. And word on the street is they could be looking to 2025 instead and resetting their front lines of the team, which is exactly what Chicago should do, to be honest with you, or at least with some of their picks, and reset the front lines of their team, working inside out, adding key pieces to make the transition with a rookie quarterback that much easier in 2025. So I just read that today. It was through a Vikings outfit in Minnesota. And man, if that's accurate, then the Vikings picks just got that much more dangerous, in my opinion. Like, I would rather have them grab a quarterback, take those 2 picks and move up and grab a quarterback, because now they're going to have, pick 11 and pick 27 or something like that. They're going to have 2 picks before the Lions even get 1. So, yeah, not cool. Not cool at all. So that's it for news around the NFC North. he covered our latest and greatest news on the Detroit Lions. And we will get phone lines open up here in just a moment. Oh, it looks like someone just bought a coffee. See if we've got a name mixed with it this time. What do we got here? Mike P. Shout out to Mike P. For buying a coffee today. Appreciate you, my man. It's awesome. Very kind of you.
Intercepted. Coming back the other way.
And Braylon, I owed you some Dan Miller too, didn't I?
Lions are going to win it. Lions are bringing the NFC North title back to Detroit. One final time, Jared. One final time. Moves in behind center. Takes the snap. Takes the knee. This game is over.
All right. So Mike P says Turner, I would take in a minute. I would too, man. Actually, I would take him in a hot second, to be honest with you. Devin says A-Rod says he has 4 seasons left. Who's A-Rod? Aaron Rodgers? There's no way he plays 4 more seasons. That guy has gone into too many dark retreats, eating too much fungus, coming out thinking that, he's 13 years old again when he's not. King SJ says having a hard time picking a specific opponent in 24. There are a lot of games that stick out to me this year. There is, man. There's a ton. This is a tough, very, very, very tough schedule. Well, tough opponent list. We don't know the schedule yet. And last year, what I had said is our schedule couldn't have been any more perfect than it really was outside of the gauntlet of 3 games in 11 days. But the way that it was set up so that we had some nice long layovers between, some of the trips out west in our longest trips, really, like to Dallas, we had some nice layovers, 10 days between games. I think we had that 2, if not 3 times last year, at least 2, maybe 3. And setting it up that way, I mean, that gave the Lions a lot of time to, fix all the nicks and cuts and have more time to, run through the tape and get prepared. Let's see here. Mike P says Houston is one of the best teams playing in 24 with Diggs will only make them better. I couldn't agree more. Steve Lykin says definitely a tough schedule this year. King SJ says not the game I'm the most worried about, but Buffalo is definitely one I'm marking on the calendar. A lot of Bills fans around here I would love to silence. That's right. You're up in Toronto, aren't you? Blue Lion, that's a new name. Welcome in, Blue Lion. Says the Lions need some O-line depth, maybe in the draft. I would be surprised if the Lions did not walk out of this draft with at least, one offensive lineman. What I was saying earlier today when I did the pop-up live talking about Vildor is that it would make more sense, in my opinion, because we have Graham Glasgow locked up for 3 years who can cover Frank Ragnow, that now we don't really need a guard. Like, we don't just need a guard that can play center or a center that can play guard because we have Graham. Now it makes sense that we get a right tackle. And I know you're thinking, well, we got Panay, but it's not for Panay. It's for Taylor Decker. And I know what you're saying right there. That makes no sense either, Will. What the hell? Here's why it makes sense. Because if Taylor Decker goes down, we're not putting anybody else over there other than Panay Sewell. So that means we need a solid right tackle to come in to take over for Panay Sewell. And right now we have Dan Skipper, Coyote Awosika, Colby Sorsdahl. I think we got Matt Neese or whatever his name is, or Farniak and then Neese. So nobody. We really have nobody. And that's why I think it makes sense to grab a tackle early. Now, would you be opposed of grabbing a top tier tackle at 29? I think the entire draft crowd would probably melt down. Like, it would be a complete, what show. So in my opinion, again, grab a right tackle. That way you can slide him into right guard, if needed as backup, because it's easier transition. You can slide Panay to left tackle if Taylor Decker goes down. Graham Glasgow has Ragnow covered, And Colby's coming into his second season. So I am expecting Colby Sorsdahl to be able to step up and play guard this season way better than he did last year. Last year, he was just kind of thrown to the wolves because everybody got hurt like right away. I mean, we weren't even into week, 3? Vitae was gone. And I thought somebody else got hurt too, but I know Vitae was gone right away. So it would make sense to me that they do that somewhere. All right, so let me get to this question. Now, I might need just a second to think about it. So the question was, paraphrasing here, who would I want? Let me put it up in, no one's really doing this Q&A, so let me end this Q&A. Let me put up a new one. So paraphrasing was, who would you pick in the draft as your favorite, we'll just say player, but pick. Now, back me up on this. It doesn't matter what pick, or is it at 29? Like, are we saying that the Lions are stuck at 29, or can they move? Like, what are the parameters here? We're going to do whatever it takes to get this player. Is that what it means? So I think I got the question fairly right. I mean, I reworded it a little bit here, but who would, and I forgot the you. Who would you pick in the draft as your best option and best overall player? So regardless of pick, as I assume what we're going with here, why did the chat just disappear? What in the world? There we go. Get it back. So regardless of pick, regardless of round, what player would you want in this draft? That is a very tough question. So here's where I would go with it. Let me break it down. The Lions have such, I don't want to say loaded because that's a loaded word. The roster is fairly solid at this point. Like, Brad Holmes has done a really good job at giving us a lot of versatility in the draft. Positional versatility too. I mean, grabbing anybody he wants. And they both spoke to that this is the first year that they really feel they have the best opportunity to do what they want in this draft. Now, the one thing that I wanted to speak on tonight is the difference that I've seen in this free agency between previous free agencies. See, before we were picking early. And so when you're picking early, you know that the guys that you're getting have a better chance to start and play right away. This year, we're picking late. So there's less of a chance that once you get past the second round, that those guys won't be able to crack the roster, the starting roster. So what I'm trying to point out here is I think that's why Brad Holmes has added more players in free agency this season than he has in previous seasons. And he went at three, he brought in 3 players between, 4 really, Marcus Davenport, DJ Reader, Amik Robertson, and Carlton Davis, that were all starters. Except for Marcus Davenport. I mean, he didn't really play last year. So I think that's the major difference that you see this year is Brad Holmes is trying to round out this roster in free agency to plug the holes with guys that can play right away, because you just don't know what you're going to get in the later rounds of this draft unless he forces the hand of every other team around him to do what he wants them to do by moving up or moving back. So to answer this question, regardless of position, regardless of need, regardless of best player available, our offense is pretty loaded. Like, it's really loaded. And I'll tell you right now, I would not take a quarterback. Totally be off the list. Because I don't think that a quarterback is going to be as good as the player that I want to select. But I do got to bring something up real quick, though, because I've really honestly never thought about this. I've only thought about drafting and what players were available. Now, Dallas Turner is by far, again, according to my score sheet, by far the best edge rusher in this draft. He's missing a little bit of height, but he makes up for it everywhere else. Jared Verse, missing a little bit of wingspan, and he's way above average everywhere else. Chop wouldn't be the guy. Latu, I would run away from. So it would be between Dallas Turner and I'm thinking because the offense is pretty solid. See, Byron Murphy is too short for me. Jerzon Newton. Not like overly excited about his tape. So if I can have one player, I mean, it's got to be somebody that really jumps off the page. So unfortunately for me, I think that is either going to be Terrion Arnold, just because I think that, you know, given his status, I mean, his height, everything, he's probably one of the best corners, if not the best corner in this draft. Quinion Mitchell is very intriguing because he's got better height, better weight, better speed, better wingspan. Well, actually, his wingspan is about 3/4 of an inch shorter than Terrion Arnold. So it's going to be between Dallas Turner, Terrion Arnold, Quinion Mitchell, and then I've got to go to the other side of the football. Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr., Rome Odunze. Man, Marvin Harrison. And then I've got to look at the roster and I got to say, okay, we really need that tackle. We need to keep that offensive line extremely potent. And that's where Joe Alt comes into play. But I just don't see Joe Alt being a giant guard. I mean, he could be, but I think it'd be a waste. But he would be a giant guard because right now we've got our starters. So roster be damned. Here's my list. Here's my short list. Joe Alt, generational talent. Generational. Dallas Turner may not be generational. We don't know. Rome Odunze. Again, we don't know. I think it's easier to say that a tackle in the NFL or a tackle that's entering the NFL has the ability to be generational versus somebody, you know, like an offensive player, because it requires, you know, somebody else to do that position with him. It requires a quarterback to get him the ball, which I don't think there'd be any issue with Jared Goff. But the point that I'm trying to make is it requires two to make that position, not just one. Whereas an offensive lineman, it's mano a mano. Defensive lineman, it's mano a mano. You're not required to depend on anybody else to do your job. So it would be between Joe Alt and Dallas Turner, if Dallas Turner is the best defensive edge in this draft. And because of the way that our offensive line, I know I said I wouldn't do this, but it would be Dallas Turner. It honestly would be. Quinion Mitchell would probably be number 2. And Joe Alt would be number 3. Actually, I take that back. Dallas Turner would be number 1. Joe Alt would be number 2. Quinion Mitchell or Terrion Arnold would be number 3, number 4. It's really hard to pick one because I have to look, you know, at everything and evaluate, you know, the roster. But if we're disregarding the roster and pick and everything else, I think that Dallas Turner would have a more of an immediate impact based on the roster because we don't have a right defensive end that is extremely dominant right now, at least that we know of. I mean, he still has to go in there and prove himself. Joe Alt, I think, is a day one stud, and he's going to be a generational talent for the next decade. Quinion Mitchell, again, there's just too many unknowns. Too many unknowns. You never know. Yeah, you got Neighbors too, but I'm thinking height here. I can't remember how tall is Neighbors. Let me look. Neighbors. Oh, phone line's open, by the way. 313-312-0348. What do you mean I'm talking dirty, Adam? What are you talking about? All right. J Mommy says Harrison is third on her list. Kamara might have been the best season of them all. Yeah, I mean, if Latu was not injured, if he didn't have a neck injury, I wouldn't be so scared of selecting him. But because my neck is fused and I had a major neck injury in 2020, I know what it's all about every day. And now I'm not an athlete anymore, so I'm not in the shape that these guys are in. And it's a little bit different when you have, multi-million-dollar complexes, right in your backyard to get treatment from every day with the best doctors in the world. It's a little bit different. I don't understand why Neighbors is not in my wide receiver list. Like, where did he go? It doesn't make any sense that he's not in this. He disappeared. That's not good. Does anybody know how tall Neighbors is? I would agree with that too, BP. I've said that quite a bit. I think that Hutchinson has the ability to be elite. I think he does. Absolutely. And I think once we help him with a better defensive line, you're going to see Aiden just jump through the wall like the Kool-Aid man. He's going to go balls to the wall. He really will. He's going to have a great season. Yeah. So if Neighbors is 6 foot, then no. I want height. I want someone that's a little bit taller. Obviously with good speed, good hands. And Rome Odunze's the guy, man. I think that Odunze is potentially going to be better than Harrison. I know that's crazy talk, but I think that the potential is, I think that Brian Thomas Jr. could potentially be better than Harrison. And I really like Walker in a, end of the first round. I think would be a little bit early, but I do like Walker out of UNC, I believe. There's quite a bit of good wide receivers in this draft, at least in the first 2 rounds. So Soames or Vincent, no. I think that if you're honest about, about production, and then no, the answer would be no, because there's 20 defensive ends that rated better than Hutch in 2023 and 2022. And that's pass rush win rate. That's how you rate a defensive end. Are they able to beat their one-on-ones? And I know there's been a lot of argument out there of the double teams and the triple teams and that, but you've got to really go back and watch the games, because when Next Gen Stats developed this stat thing, it was great, sounded great. I mean, a lot of stuff they do is phenomenal. But when it comes to the double and triple teams, there's a flaw. And I don't know if they've corrected it yet. And I don't know if they really can. But it's driven by AI. And if you have a chip in your shoulder pad or a chip in your helmet, and you're standing next to me, we're locked up, well, it's going to read that, you're next to each other. That's it. It doesn't know that my hands are on you. It just knows that we're next to each other. So when a running back comes around and, chips Hutch, make contact and then keep going. When a tight end comes around and makes contact and keeps going, they count those as triple teams when it's not. That's a chip block. So a true double team is when two players, two defenders or two offenders really on the offensive side of the ball make contact simultaneously with the defender. It's not one and then the other. It's simultaneously, and they stay engaged in the block. Now, one may release and then go catch a linebacker or somebody that's trying to creep into the backfield, but it was still an initial double team, or if it's double team and then another guy rolls out, it's still a chip. Triple teams are extremely rare. Like, I don't even know how you could register a triple team in the NFL. Because if you went and had three guys on one, I mean, how many guys do you have on an offensive line? 5. How many guys do you have on a defensive line? No less than 4. Plus linebackers. There's no way. The quarterback would get killed every play if there was a triple team. And when I look at elite like Myles Garrett elite. So Myles Garrett truly wins the double team. DJ Reader truly wins the double team. Ali McNeil was actually double teamed 50% of the time last year. So I look at those stats pretty hard. And if you're able to beat your one-on-ones and get to the quarterback, great. If you're not, then obviously you're not elite yet. Hutch does a pretty good job. He doesn't always win his one-on-ones. And the double team thing, what I would say is if it's a very accurate stat, then if Myles Garrett can do it and 18 other guys, why can't Hutch do it? That's the difference between being very good and elite, is beating those double teams and still ranking or racking up 15 plus sacks a season. So that's the difference. He'll get there. He's fine, man. He's needing some help too. We haven't had anybody that's been super powerful on the right side of the defense that is taking pressure off of Aiden. And until that can happen, look, Aiden's an animal. The dude's an absolute animal. He's got good speed. He's got good length. He just has short arms. And, I think he's a pretty heady guy. He's a really hard worker. So he's going to explode this year. DJ Reader is going to help him explode. That's why I was so excited for us to finally get another top tier defensive tackle. As long as he stays healthy, offensive lines can't do what they were doing last year. They're not going to be able to, because if they do, then our linebackers are going to get free, or, Ali McNeil will get free, or DJ Reader will get free. Somebody's going to get free. And it could be multiple guys getting free. I think that we're going to see more work coming out of the linebackers than we will from the ends at times, to be honest with you. Yeah, Bob W. Reader got double teamed like almost every darn play. So Adam, I don't know what you're talking about. Who's Donald's? Oh, Donald. Yeah, I don't know how we would triple team him. That's just not. I mean, that means that you're going to have a center, a guard, and either a tackle or a tight end, or a center, a guard, and a running back on one player at one time. And that there's just no way that can happen. It's very rare if it does. The only times that, I would say that it happens is if someone actually releases and then someone else engages, which is more of a zone blocking scheme. So, and we run the zone a lot, especially the zone run scheme. We run it a ton. And I love it. So Detroit fan man, so you have hesitance on Turner. Oh shoot, ads around. Hold on. Come on. Yep, they certainly are. All right, should be good now. Sorry, this is still a work in progress. I haven't finished it yet because it's going to take me probably 3 years to finish it, to be honest with you. Oh, poop. Where'd it go? Let me try to hone it in. All right, so this is just a measurable sheet. This just tells me what they did at the combine. And then I went and scored everything by color. So on the right side, you've got a score here. And that's adding up, the scores that I gave for their individuals. So I got 5 for elite, 3 for first tier, 2 for second, and 1 for third. And the reason why there's not a 4 is because if you're elite, like you're elite, and that doesn't happen very often. So this score sheet tells me where these guys ended up. Now, like for instance, your wingspan. A traditional wingspan for an average male is 2 inches longer than your height. So if you're 6 foot, that's 72 inches. Your wingspan should be 74, right? So Dallas Turner is 6'2". And that means that his wingspan should be what? 76 inches. His wingspan is 83, which means he's 7 inches longer in his wingspan over his height. And so the elite category is anything that is I think it was 5 inches more. Where did I put it? Oh, I see I got Broderick Martin down there. I was scoring him. He scored a 24, by the way, which is like bottom of the bottom. So anyway, that's elite. His vertical, 40.5 inches. Am I lagging, Trace? I could be lagging because I got all these damn sheets open. Here, let me try to close some stuff up. All right. So anyway, his split 154. I mean, that's crazy good. And the way that I compared this is I went and compared this to all of the top 20 edge rushers in the league over like the last 10 seasons or 5 seasons, whatever it was, in the NFL. So I went and got all of their combine information. I added that all to a sheet and then started whittling it all down. Like what's a perfect height? What's a perfect weight? How much, bigger is your wingspan than your height and the vertical. I mean, everything. So I whittled it all down to kind of create the perfect defensive end. And I'll be honest, the perfect defensive end was 6'3.5". So that's why he's below average for me on height. That is his only bad score, 6'2". So, all right, cool, Eric. Appreciate it. His weight, obviously it's right at, average. I mean, there's plenty of guys like Micah Parsons, I think is like 244 or 245. So when you compare him to Micah Parsons, I mean, he's right in line, but when you compare his 40 to everybody, he's elite. His hand size is great, 9 7/8. It's above average, but then he's elite in the last 5 categories. His arm length, that's what you want to see. So I think Hutchinson's arms are like 30, 32, and he's 6'7". Matter of fact, let's pull Hutchinson up and compare him on this list. Let's see where Hutchinson would score. I've never done this before. I'm not trying to be a jerk. Hutchinson kind of gets like my wrath because I want him to be so great, and he is great. He's just not elite yet, but and he's gonna be. But let's use him for a minute. So Hutchinson, Aiden, is 6'7", 268. I don't see, he doesn't have a 40 listed in here. Give me just a second here. So Hutch ran a 4.74. Easy now. Easy now, Mike P. All right, so I don't understand why when I look up Aiden Hutchinson's combine info, it doesn't pop up. Let me go to Draft Buzz and see if they populated it for him. Okay, this can't be right. They're saying he ran the 40 and 509. There's no way. 4.74. There we go. 6'7", 268. And he's got his workout combine. What about his pro day? All right, here we go. Vertical, 36 inches. His broad was 117. That's 9 foot and 3/4. So it'll be 9'8". No. 9'9". Is I didn't do 3 cone. I don't see a split for him. Let me try to find it one other area here. All right, here we go. Now I got it. So his arms are 32 and an eighth. His wings, his hands, he's got big hands, 10 inches and a quarter. 6'7". I already got that in there. Broad was 9'9". His 10-yard split was 1.62. So he would be green. Whoops, wrong color. And wingspan. That's the only other thing I need. He didn't do a bench. Well, what in the heck? There's no wingspan for him? Why is there no wingspan? One second here. All right, wingspan 78 and an eighth inches. Someone came through. All right, so we'll start with wingspan. So he's 6'7", which means his wingspan, just to be, equal to his height, would have to be 79 inches. So his wingspan is actually below his height, which means he would be below average. Hand size, obviously elite. Our blues look different. I think that's the right one. I got the split in there. 10-yard splits in there. Jack 21-25. It's on the right side. It says split. You can see it, right? I hope. I think you see it. Yeah, so I think for Turner, you're going to have to be in the top 15. That's my guess. And I think that you're going to have to give up at least either next year's second or this year's third to do it. But I would do next year's. So, all right. So vertical at 36 inches. I mean, you can look where everybody else scored. Okay. So 36, he would have been in the green because anything above 34 and a half is where that belongs. So remember, this is just mine. I understand my colors are not matching up here. I don't know why. There we go. There we go. So Broad at 9.9. Again, he would have been just average. And now I didn't make these up. So these are all based on the top 20 ever to do it. And I took all of their measurements and made this list compared to, you know, the other players that weren't in the top 20 and what their measurables were. So wingspan below average, arm length obviously is in the red. Hand size is elite. 40-yard dash is orange. Weight, he's good there. It's kind of hard to have an elite weight, you know, because I mean, he would be an elite weight, but for his height, he wouldn't. So I know that one's going to be kind of off just because I compared weights of everybody and there was like a range between 245 and 295 for defensive ends, but there was also a range between 6 foot and, 6'7". So there's a big range there. So if we were to score him, he has 1, 2, he's got 3 points. 10 is 13. Orange is 2, so that's 15, 17, and 6, so 23. And on this list, he would have been, so we got 2 18s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got 10 guys on this list that are at or below Hutchinson. And quite honestly, on this list, when you look at the guys that I'm calling elite, it would be Dallas Turner. Let me highlight him in blue here. It would be Darius Robinson. It would be Eric Watts. I don't even know who that guy is. Cedric Johnson. This is just based on measurables. Miles Cole, which for some reason I think the Lions like. But look at Jalix Hunt. He scored a 40. And I watched all these guys tape, and some of them are pretty good. So those are all your elite guys. Hutchinson would finish more than likely in probably the orange category. I'd have to go back and redo it. I'm not going to give him an orange yet, but so anyway, look, it's just a measurable thing. So when you look at the measurables and you try to evaluate players, I mean, what's the first thing that we get? Well, we got their stats. We know where they played. Well, then I look at, okay, what was their for a defender? What type of offense did they go up against? What was the average for a defensive end? What was the average offensive line they went up against? This is how deep it goes, and the nice part about, being a scout for a team is you have all of those numbers already available to you. You've got 2 or 3 guys or girls that are just doing stats on offensive line, defensive line, cornerback rankings. And they've got so many numbers, it's sickening, of all of this information about all of these players and positional groups. So if I remember correctly, the year that Aiden Hutchinson had 19 sacks, they averaged an offensive line. They went up against an offensive line that averaged 80th in the NC2A out of 30 schools or 126 schools. They only went up against 2 elite offensive lines. One of them was Michigan State. One of them was Ohio State. So that's why Aiden Hutchinson was not high on my list for that draft, just because of who he went up against. And I felt like a lot of those sacks, they came against non-elite schools. He had 3 against Ohio State. That was the first year that I really started doing this. And I started going deep off into the numbers. And but I also always felt that Aiden required a really good defense around him. And as long as he had that, the dude has a lot of elite tendencies to him. And that's why I know he's going to be fine once we, build this defensive line around him. It's like kind of the same thing that people say about Jared Goff. Like, he's only good because he has a good offensive line. He's only good because he's got Amon-Ra St. Brown. Well, it's all horse crap when you compare that to Aiden or to Jared Goff, because every quarterback needs that. Every quarterback that wins needs a good offensive line. Not every defensive end needs a good defense to win. That's the difference. I just feel like that's how Aiden plays. He plays very well when he's got good guys around him, and he's learning how to be a solo contributor where he can do things on his own without, a big cast around him. The only problem is Brad Holmes is putting a cast around him. So he's going to have a better defense really soon. And it's going to benefit him big time. So I take all of that stuff into consideration when I start grading these guys, for this year. And it's you gotta understand that I spend more time on this more than your average person. Your average person doesn't sit down for 12 hours in a day and just rolls through tape and rolls through, stat after stat after stat of offensive line rankings, and then evaluating some of the offensive linemen, and then rolling tape on those offensive linemen against, certain defensive ends to see just how good they were. And if they happen to have really good, teams that they went up against, I go and watch those tapes to see, all right, well, how well did, this offensive lineman produce against this defensive end? Even though I'm not really looking at either of them right now, I want to see how well they produced against each other. All of that information compiles into your thought process on a specific individual. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work for one person. I need a team to do what some of these people do. Yeah, there you go. Who's that? AC? Stats are great, but how's the defensive end's hands, explosiveness, and how good do they pick angles? So the new level quarterbacks like Lamar don't burn you because of over pursuit, etc. Turner against LSU reminds me of the old Lions defensive ends. So Aiden had a big issue with that in 2021 and part of 2022. In 2022, oh man, if I can remember correctly now, there was about 700 yards of rushing between the quarterbacks and the running backs that came off of his gap responsibility because he over pursued. He would get behind the quarterback as opposed to staying lateral or adjacent to the quarterback in his zone. And that's just training. That's just, learning discipline. Sometimes he would play undisciplined, and he did not, I don't know. I think respect is the wrong word, but maybe he couldn't trust the guys that were next to him or behind him to be in the right position. And I think maybe he was trying to do too much. And sometimes that gets you into trouble. When you just do your job, like Dan Campbell preaches, just do your job. Don't worry about anybody else. Let them make the mistake. Don't cover for them. Let them get burned. You don't get yourself burned, which in turn burns somebody else is the theory. So you just do your job. Let everybody else fall in line behind you. And if they screw up, then we'll see that on tape. But if you screw up and then they screw up, we're blaming you. You know what I mean? That's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. The poop always rolls downhill, right? So, yeah, look, I believe this new D-line coach is going to have a good season. I mean, the more and more I read about these guys, the more and more I like them. I miss Wash. Todd Wash was great. He absolutely. I wish he wouldn't have took it off to Carolina. Our defensive line kind of fell apart there for a minute. We had a great season last year against the run. Great season. And we got to continue that this year. I think that John Scott did an excellent job. But my question is, how much of that was John Scott, though? Because some of the other things just didn't work out. Just didn't work out. Better the Hunt finally joins us tonight. How you doing, man? I'm about ready to get off. You're just coming in. I mean, I'm getting ready to end the stream, and you're just coming in. That sounded terrible. I'm going to have to edit that out. Look, so again, don't think that I'm a Aiden Hutchinson hater. Everything that I say, it comes from what I just showed you guys. It's research, and I try to speak from a place of fact and data. The fan inside me would tell you that every single one of our Detroit Lions is elite. That's what the fan inside of me would say. And I wouldn't be wrong, because the fan is never wrong. But doing it for other reasons and trying to give good quality content and education for myself and for others. Because I do a lot of this just for me, to be honest with you. I just thought that it would have been cool to share it. And that's kind of how this started. Was I started sharing, and then people wanted more. So then it turned into this. And now I'm developing a lot of different things that I never thought I would do. And you guys are right here along with it. And I love it. You had to work tonight, Randy. Hey, Randy, when's elk season out there? You told me, but I forget. You were telling me something. You had to get your stamp or something at some certain point. Yeah, all right, Trey. Sounds good. August 30. Okay. Man, that's right in the thick of football season starting. So anyway, I think that there's a lot of good options. This whole thing that we just talked about for the last 30 minutes started because somebody gave us a question, which was, who would you pick in the draft regardless of anything else? Who is your favorite player? And that's how we just got started on this whole last segment about, defensive ends and why I think that Turner is probably the best. And right now it's based on measurables. So a lot of the other things that he's doing wrong, you can teach, right? You can, these guys can be, educated as long as they're coachable. They can be educated on technique. But what you cannot teach is you can't teach arm length. You can't teach speed. You can't teach height. You can't teach someone's body size. So if you have an elite body size and you do some things really well already, the rest of it you can learn. It's just you have to be able to apply it. And that's where I think that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes really do a fine job at finding guys that love football. Because if they come in and treat it like a job, they're not going to love football. If they come in loving football and just so happen to get paid millions of dollars to do it, they're going to work harder because they love football. And I think that was probably the first thing that I heard out of Brad Holmes that kind of perked my ears up was, you want them to what? What do you mean love football? Like, don't they love football already? I mean, they've been playing it their whole life. And then I'm like, yeah, I guess you know what? He's probably right. Like, if you think about it, when you choose your career, not everybody can choose their career and they're happy to go to work every day. That's the difference between a job and, and your passion, something you enjoy doing. You go to punch a clock. That's kind of where that whole thing started. You punch in, you punch out. I'm just here to punch a clock. I remember I just work here. That's what people say, as opposed to, you go to work because you love it, or the work that you choose, you love it. You start your own business because you love it. And it's not work anymore. A lot more responsibility, but it's not work anymore. Same thing with football. If you love football and you just want to play the game, and now you just so happen to get paid a bunch of money to do it, you're probably going to invest in yourself a heck of a lot more than you were able to before, because before you didn't have millions of dollars to invest in yourself, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in yourself. So I think that that's probably the thing that really turns this team, the corner a little bit faster, is the guys that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are finding right now. They just want to do it because they want to do it. I think that's the difference. So nobody called tonight, so I'm going to disconnect the phone. We'll take calls next week. At least I didn't hear anybody call. Nobody called, right? What are we doing here? We have big bucks on our property up here, 10 points and bigger. Wow. Where's that? You in Michigan, Trace? I only hunt trophies. I know it sounds terrible, but I haven't hunted in forever. And I got spoiled at my mom's place, man. I was always able to pull some nice big ones out of there, but I haven't hunted in forever. It's been a long time. Run DMG says, read an article about how some teams are experimenting with AI to dig deeper into player profiles and team fits. Interesting. Speaking of AI, I wish they would really use these new cameras, for the first down marker and track the ball that way. You just put the ball. I mean, once you start the game, the AI, and the cameras does the rest. Oh, you're up by Traverse City. Okay. Yeah, there's big bucks up there. A lot of farms up there. They eat well. What else we got going on here? Demigod 3-3 says, and he learns a little bit of how to give himself leverage against a quarterback like Fields, because he picks him off that last play before half by making him run first, but panic with no space to work with. I don't know what you were commenting on there, 313, but I think you're talking about Aiden. The thing that I loved about Aiden last year is there was times throughout the season where you could tell that he was growing, and you could see it. You could see a difference in the way that, he was prepared for just about anything on a play. I can't remember which game it was exactly, but there was a play where he did not break the threshold of, the offensive line. He stayed in his zone. And it was probably the first time I've ever seen him do it, like intentionally do it. A lot of times he would just crash the line or bull rush and get himself back behind the quarterback. And like on Carson Wentz, he wrapped all the way around him on like one of the first sacks, and then Wentz kind of backed up into him and he got the sack. Like Hutch should never have been on the opposite hash, right? Never. He should never break the hash plane on the left side, depending on what's going on in the play, but he really shouldn't be. But anyway, he was crashing the line, and then he would hang back, and then he would crash the line, he would hang back, and then the play kind of forced Fields at times back inside the pocket to go the other way, or back up inside to run through the middle where he would get bottled up. Yeah, so the draft hat, the one that I got on right now, almost all of them are sold out. I ordered, I think it was called like an Omaha something hat. And when it came, it was damaged. I had to send it back. And I said, well, can you just send me a new one? And they're like, nope, they're all sold out. I'm like, how can you be sold out already? Like, you guys realize how many people are going to order these and you're already sold out? That didn't make any sense. But yeah, I ordered a few extras. Who's going to the Seattle game? I don't know. Is Seattle at home or away? Is it away? I don't have the schedule in front of me. All right, well, we're going to put an end to this tonight. So, again, news tonight obviously was Vildor and Brock Wright. Vildor comes back. Brock Wright gets matched by the Lions. He'll be in Detroit now for the next 3 seasons, potentially. And then Vildor comes back on a 1-year deal. We don't know the terms of the deal just yet. But more likely, this is a camp body move with more than an outside chance, I believe, for him to make the roster, given the fact that he's coming back to work with his former DB coach. And he's probably going to learn a little bit, more about himself in Detroit. And I think that Vildor being in the system for a second season could be a great opportunity for him to, kind of spread his wings a little bit and play a lot better, because he's going to need to. And it's not that hard to play a lot better compared to what he did last year. But right now, Lions are in great position, man. This is going to be one of the most exciting drafts I think we've ever seen. And it could go in any direction. The Lions really could do anything they want to do as long as they have a trade partner. And I firmly believe that when we walk out of this draft, there's not going to be that many analysts that say, why did they do that? Or that doesn't make sense. Because last year, that's what they said. And they all got burned. So you got to trust in the process at some point. This is a different time for Brad Holmes to be picking in the draft. This is going to tell us everything that we need to know about Brad Holmes. Can he do it outside of the top 10? We've seen him pick at 12 2 seasons in a row because he traded. But can he do it in the outside of the top 10 without a trade? Or will he trade to put himself back into position? Those are the questions that he's going to answer very soon. But we'll be back here bright and early in the morning, 8 a.m. on the Rise and Grind morning show. That's right. We start at 8 a.m. And if you have not subscribed to the @RockedOn Syndicate on the morning show, please subscribe right now at Rocked On Syndicate. The morning show is only on that channel. It is not on Rocked On Detroit Lions channel. It's still part of the Rocked On Podcast Network, of course, but it's going to be its own thing. We're going to be adding some more days. Hopefully next week. We'll be talking about it Friday. We'll see if we're going to be able to bring a couple more people on to fill in some days so that we can have more time covered throughout the week. The one thing that might happen, though, is you might see more of like the old ESPN style, where you're going to have the morning show that covers the topics, of the late night of what rolled in, the night before. So if there's a podcast the night before, it might cover some of those same topics. But then that night, it would be everything that kind of happens throughout the day, and then anything else that we're going to throw in. But ESPN would roll the same thing over and over, like every half hour. Remember? It would be like the same thing. So I don't want it to be like that. But what I'm saying is there might be some times where we overlap a little bit just because there's not as much stuff to talk about. But that's where we're going to get deeper into the NFC North and more teams around the league and have more news and information available. So that's the goal, to make it a true morning show and have more information 5 days a week for 2 hours would be the goal. It's going to take some time to get there. We need more people. So that's it for tonight. Thank you for joining Rocked On Detroit Lions right here on your home of the Rocked On Podcast Network. And we'll see you guys tomorrow bright and early at Rocked On Syndicate, 8 a.m. Be there. We'll see you guys. Take care. Have a good night.